Good afternoon, and why not? Good evening to everyone following us here in this amazing Saturday where we come together to learn, to get together, still online. Hopefully, soon we'll be getting together physically as well. But until then, we commemorate the ability for us to be together, to study, and to get out of our comfortable zones, right? Because it's also a way for us to see when we stop what we do when in our day-to-day lives to stop and say, you know what, let me go ahead and connect with a higher message. Maybe let me go ahead and connect with brothers and sisters who is also looking to find inner peace. Tonight we'll have Kirsten with us, leading us into this evening, which is an amazing topic that is dear to all of us. But before we pass the word to Kirsten, let us do what we usually do at the beginning of our talks, which is read a passage of the book Happy Life. Tonight, chapter 112, and we will read this page from the author Joanna de Angelis through the hands of the medium Divaldo Franco, and then we'll pray together. And she says, read one small page a day where you will find encouragement and inspiration. Incorporate this duty into your daily habits. It will enrich you with jubilation, clearing away the clouds that could envelop you in the hours to come, and leading you to well-being in case there is some disagreeable surprise. Everyone needs a good counselor, and on this page, which you will extract from the Gospels, you will find the secure guideline and the word of wisdom for any situation. If men would just reflect a little before acting, they would avoid countless evils. Since others are not doing it, why not do it yourself? With this message in our hearts, I would like to invite everyone for a short prayer. Dear Father, Mother God, we ask you that you guide our minds this afternoon into this evening. Our hearts to connect mind to mind, heart to heart, and vibrate well through these teachings that we are about to receive. Welcoming this first talk of the month of September. Asking that you guide us to exercise these teachings in the future through the interactions we will have with one another, whether in our circles of life, family members and friends, or outside of them, leading us to create a better society, a better atmosphere here on planet Earth. And we ask you to guide our dear friend Kirsten, who will lead us tonight into this amazing teachings of our Master Jesus, how to perceive life with our older brother, much wise, well-evolved Master Jesus. This way, we're thankful for the presence of one another here, the presence of those who will be watching us in the future, to partake with us in this amazing work that the Spirit Society of Baltimore collectively puts together. We're thankful, and so be it. And we are welcoming one another to this amazing moment of enlightenment. Kirsten here tonight with us again, discussing this another amazing chapter of the book Jesus in Our Lives. Last time, Kirsten spoke about Jesus and insecurity, and tonight she'll be speaking about Jesus and suffering. So with no further ado, we would like to pass the word to Kirsten and welcome everyone to this moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leo, and hello to everybody that's watching on the web or the recorded version of this. We're so happy to be here together, sharing this beautiful book and this beautiful chapter. You know, every chapter by Joanna in this book, and really every book by Joanna de Angelis, we always say it's so beautiful, it's so moving, it's so touching. But this particular chapter, we really mean it. It really is one for the books, no pun intended. It is very inspiring, it is very uplifting, and it really offers up an opportunity to reframe how we view and understand suffering. So let's jump right into it, into our presentation and our PowerPoint for this evening, Jesus in Suffering. This is chapter 18 of the book, Jesus in Our Days. So normally we give a sort of more definition out of a dictionary, but today we decided to go the more philosophical route. And a lot of you may be familiar with this particular German philosopher, Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche, or Nietzsche. And he had many very interesting ideas. Some people, depending upon who you read and what you read, some people call him a pessimist or that he's pessimistic, his perspective, but not us. He has very interesting, very profound way to look at life, and some people might consider it even morbid or just really missing the mark. But not really. He just was wiser than most at that time. So let's share his particular quote, his perspective, and his definition and understanding what suffering was. He said, this is a quote, "The discipline of suffering, of great suffering. Don't you know that this discipline has been the sole cause of every enhancement in humanity so far? The tension that breeds strength into the unhappy soul and its shudder at the sight of great destruction. Its inventiveness and courage in enduring, surviving, and interpreting. Greatness it has been given. Weren't these the gifts of suffering? Of the disciple of great suffering?" And another quote by him, he says, "To those human beings who are of any concern to me, I wish suffering, desolation, sickness, ill treatment, indignities, because I wish them the only thing that can prove today whether one is worth anything or not, that one endures." So it might sound even a tad bit on the morbid side, if you will, because who wishes their closest of friends, their nearest and dearest, suffering, pain, hardship? Well, there was a much more profound and deep reason why he wished that, because he understood that suffering, unlike our modern understanding, or even maybe it's not so modern, most typical understanding of suffering is we want to do away with it, we want to numb it, and we just want to resolve it and move on from it and not suffer anymore. But Nietzsche, like many other philosophers, realized the gift in suffering. He realized it was much like a sander. You know, when you're a carpenter or you're working in carpentry and you are sanding a rough edge, and by the time you're done, it's all smooth. Well, suffering in a very simplistic way is kind of the same. You know, it allows us to become refined. It really can bring out the best in us and make us realize that, hey, I can endure this. I can overcome this. I am strong enough. It's a great thought to think about that Nietzsche put out there over a century ago, and is still relevant till today. That's why he's so well known, such a well-known philosopher. But let's go ahead and dig right into the words of Joanna de Angelis. She starts out this particular chapter saying, "Whenever the ill and infirm approached Jesus, he always asked them if they really wanted to be healthy and if they believed he could heal them. It was of fundamental importance to reestablish their inner security about those two requisites, wanting and believing. Very important. Since they complement each other, they are essential for the physical and mental reestablishment of the person desiring to be healed. Let's back that up and let's repeat it. Wanting and believing. They are two requisites. They complement each other, and they are essential for the person desiring to be healed, physically and mentally. That's pretty powerful. Christ himself showed that to us. We have to want it. We have to believe it. Let's keep that in mind, because that truly is applicable to a lot of things in life, whether we want to achieve our goals or whether we're looking for healing or to overcome a situation. Physical, mental, what have you, a trauma, doesn't matter. We have to want it and believe it. Food for thought. When Jesus asked the man at the pool of Bethesda, "Do you want to be healed?" It's a valid question. How many people are comfortable in their illness or brokenness? Are we comfortable in our brokenness? Are we comfortable where we are? Are we complacent in life? Are we striving for anything? Hopefully you're striving to be better. Do you have goals? These are questions to ask ourselves. What are we working towards? Things for us to think about. She goes on to say, wanting intensely, unreservedly, completely alters people's psychophysical picture from one of imbalance to one of balance, thus helping the organism restore its damaged areas. That is powerful. Joanna is giving us the key to the city, if you will, the golden key to at least unlock that part of ourselves to begin to heal and begin your process or your walk on the road to healing. Wanting and intensely, with no reservations. That's what unreservedly means. No reservations whatsoever, no doubts, nothing. It completely alters our psychosphere. And we're going to talk about that here more in a second. She goes on to say the illness is nothing more than a symptom of the disarrangement of the spirit, the illness's actual bearer. So illness is a symptom. It's the effect, and the cause lies within the spirit. The act of wanting frees it from pernicious elements, generators of disturbances that surface in the emotions, mind, and body. So the mere act of wanting to be better, wanting to change, wanting and believing that it can happen is absolutely vital in this healing process for all of us. She goes on to say, wanting means deciding, abandoning parasitical complacency. Look at that word, that's pretty strong. parasitical complacency, or the fear of assuming new responsibilities in relation to life, thereby breaking the chains of persistent rebelliousness, self-pity, and the shadows in which the individual hides. It means we are making a conscious decision. We've made a conscious decision to stop being complacent, but not just your regular run-of-the-mill complacency. She refers to parasitical complacency. So if you know what the word parasite means, or parasitical, means it's something that lives off something else, and it's kind of like a symbiosis in a way. So oftentimes we're living in an environment, whether it's friends, family, what have you, where we're surrounded by this psychosphere from one another. We're all kind of complacent. And she's going to go on to say, and talk a little bit about this in a second here, that, once we decide to change, once we want to change and make the effort to change, that's when we start experiencing some real problems or some real challenges. And one of the reasons for that is because we've lived around this psychosphere and this parasitical complacency, which often involves other people, that other people don't like that. Because you are challenging their status quo. You are challenging what they've deemed as normal and just a way of life. She goes on to say, those who want, invest. Those who want, invest. And to invest, they act in a way to reap the desired results. So if we want something, we invest in it. And your actions reflect that. I'm going to give a very basic example of this. We were recently talking to a family member about the importance of saving, having a savings and money and things like that, and how important it is to be mindful and be a good steward of your money. And then it was funny because then we went on to go spend money. So were we truly invested in our decision? Because our actions were not reflecting that. So when we truly want it, our actions inevitably will reflect that. It's kind of like common sense, or like that old adage, actions speak louder than words. Actions truly show what we're truly feeling. She goes on to say, believing is a serious decision, one of emotional and human maturity. Now let's quickly open a little sidebar here. We could get into a long discussion, a philosophical discussion about belief versus faith. But for the sake of our conversation, we're going to say they're similar. One's a synonym for the other. So for the sake of this conversation, we're going to say that they're similar. We're not going to get into a whole debate of that, maybe at a later time. But for now, she says, belief is a serious decision, one of emotional and human maturity. Belief lives innate in the individual, waiting for stimuli that enable it to blossom, injecting life with additional forces. So belief is something that's just, it's within us. Innate is something that's just there. And you just innately believe and you just understand. And this doesn't just come to us from nowhere out of the blue. Often it's been many lifetimes through our experiences. But she goes on to say, there is an automatic, natural belief, the archetypical inheritance of past generations, which induces one to accept facts, ideas, and experiences without analyzing them rationally. So there's one type of belief, the belief where we just believe stuff because it's what we've always done for many incarnations, and we just accept facts and ideas without really questioning them at all. And I'll give you an example of this. Often, maybe not that often, this is a very elementary example, but just to illustrate this rather complex thought that Joanna is sharing. Often I had this conversation with a friend of ours, and who's not from this country, and we would often recite a phrase in English that often had its meaning came from hundreds of years ago or came from a really complex backstory, but we had never really considered it. But then we kind of noticed that this particular person always was questioning and wondering what lied beneath why things were the way that they are, or why things are the way that they are, instead of just saying, accepting, oh, well, that's just the way things are. Yeah, but why? Why are they that way? And that is another kind of belief, Joanna says, which is the result of logical development, of evidence based on events to which reason gives its assent. So on one hand, there's this archetypical inheritance of past generations, this old habits from our past of just believing things when we're told. And then there's this other kind of belief that comes from our logical development, our understanding and of our ability to reason and ask why, how. She goes on to say, therefore, one believes based on both instinct and experiential knowledge. And we wanted to illustrate this as well when she talks about belief and the power of belief has in our lives. We wanted to bring a quote from the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 19, item 5, that reads, the power of faith can be demonstrated in a direct and special manner in magnetic action. Through the intermediary of faith, man acts on the fluids, which are a universal agent, modifying their qualities and giving them, in a manner of speaking, irresistible impulsion, but which are nothing more than the consequences of a law of nature. So believing, faith, it truly does have this magnetic power, this ability to really mold what's around us and really changes our psychosphere. She goes on to sort of explain more about this. She says, when one wants to be free from doubt, the belief in one's success is implicit in the desire. The belief in one's success is implicit in the desire when one wants to be free from doubt. That's how strong our ability, when we have faith, how much we can change our own lives. Fear does not gain a foothold, and hesitation does not produce a lack of confidence. The mental landscape glows with light, and the components of unhappiness dissolve under the powerful rays of a well-directed will. Once again, she's showing us, reminding us of our power that we have in our own hands. as co-creators. We are creating this world around us, this reality around us. She goes on to say that wanting and believing lead to struggle. Why? Due to the decision to exit the shadowy cave for the arena of success. If we go back and reflect on the allegory of the cave, or if we go back to the book Happy Life, I believe it's in Happy Life. It's one of, actually, we have the book right here. It's in the book Happy Life. And it's the story. Nope, it's not in here. I apologize. It's in one of the Spiritist books, and my pregnancy brain is not allowing me to remember at this very moment. But it's the story of the little red fish. I think it's in the book Liberation. So it just kind of came back to me. In the book Liberation, the introduction, before they start the book, they tell the story of the little red fish. And if you haven't read that, you really need to, because it's sort of similar. Because once this little red fish decides he wants to get out of this, life that he was living, as a fish, but it's metaphorical in showing us that once we want to do that, we experience a ton of struggles. When he wanted to warn everyone else around him in his pond that, hey, this pond's going to dry up. We need to get out of here. There's a whole other bigger ocean. But in order to do that, the fish had to diminish the amount of their food intake to make them a little bit smaller, to go through this little crack to get to the bigger rivers and ocean. I won't spoil the rest of the story for you. You have to go and read it. But it's just interesting. We see this time and time again for anyone who's ever tried to work on themselves or who is actively working on themselves. You know that you do endure, especially in the beginning, struggles. Because people around us, which we already talked about, and just changing is not always easy. Modifying our lives is not always easy. But therein lies the key. We have to really want it. Because if you don't truly want it or believe it, the odds are you're going to fall back into old ways. But let's continue on and read on from what Joanna is saying. Let's put it back here up on my screen. 1 second. Okay. She goes on to say, after happy achievement, those two moral values must continue to command one's emotional integrity in order to avoid a relapse. So it must consistently be something that we are working on. It must be a part of the fabric of who we are, wanting and believing, never giving up that hope, never giving up that desire to be better. And then she brings us a short little reminder from Jesus' times to illustrate her idea. She says, as was the case in several other incidents, in the one involving the paralytic lowered through the roof to the master's presence, two issues were involved. To the direct question, do you believe I can heal you? The lame man answered, yes, demonstrating his faith, while at the same time showing, due to the effort he put forth to be there, that he wanted to regain his health. So he rallied his friends. There was no Amtrak train or, shuttle bus to Jesus. There was donkey. If you're lucky, you had a horse, caravan of some sort, and some really good friends and family. So he put a lot of effort into getting folks together to bring him there because he wanted it, and he believed that if he could just be around Jesus, he would be healed. And this is where Joanna says, he had set friends and sympathetic persons in motion. He had submitted to the discomfort of being carried there. He had increased his pain, and because he wanted, he was successful. So it's not like he rode first class from wherever he was to wherever Christ was at that time. No, he endured a tremendous amount of discomfort and pain given his paralytic state, as an inability to move himself. And I'm sure just the manner in which they carried him wasn't the easiest for anyone involved. But because he wanted it so much, and he organized all of that, he was successful. So much so that Joanna says, touched by such effort, Jesus freed him from his infirmity. Because he could see, Jesus could see, he wanted, he believed it, and his actions reflected that. It's pretty powerful. Pretty powerful. It puts the ball in our court. Joanna's saying, here are the tools. This is what you got to do. You want to get better? You want to get healed? You want to come out of that dark space? You have to want it bad enough, and you got to believe. And it doesn't matter how much someone else wants it for you. If we don't want it for ourselves, and if we don't believe it, it shall not come to pass. Because the personal responsibility that each one of us has is absolutely a given. No one else can walk the walk for us. We got to do it ourselves. She goes on to say, and these are some of her closing thoughts that we're going to discuss a little bit. And actually, before we read this part of the chapter, and it's the ending part of the chapter, we felt this part of the chapter to be, of course, all parts of the chapter were super enlightening. But once you reach sort of the climax of this chapter, which is right towards the end of it, and she's built up all of this understanding of wanting and believing and knowing that those are the keys to success and overcoming our suffering, our hardships, to healing, true healing. We realize truly it's a decision that one has to make. Again, no one can really do that for us. We can have amazing loved ones in our corner. We can have the support of the Dalai Lama and all the greats in this world. But if we ourselves are not ready or willing or believe, it won't happen. I can see this within the medical field, working with certain illnesses, if not all illnesses, primarily when we're dealing with things such as addiction. And when someone is not wanting it for themselves, doesn't matter how much you want it for them, they have to want it for themselves. But again, this is applicable to all manner of suffering in our lives. And it's an internal movement that's very unique and personal. And we cannot tell you what that's going to look like for you. Because for each one of us, it's going to look a little bit different because we're all different people. We're unique. But at least we have that initial understanding that it's the wanting and believing that are going to open up the gates for us to begin our journey of healing. She goes on to say, in your difficulties and suffering, abandon your complacency about them and make the firm decision to want to be happy. And then believe that you can actually be happy. When we read this for the first time quite a while ago, we have to admit we were skeptical first. But then, obviously, a few seconds later, we realize Joanna is nothing but wisdom and a wealth of it. So if she's bringing us this idea that it's a decision to be happy, then that's what it is. Now, she doesn't say anywhere in her text here that once you decide to be happy, it's going to be easy. She doesn't say that. What she does say is when we make that firm decision to want to be happy and believe that we can be, we're on the right road. You know, sometimes we can get so stuck in our own suffering, in our own pain, that it's like a cycle, you know, like a broken record. We become even used to it. It becomes like our constant companion. And we begin to perhaps reject any ideas that will ever truly get better. Or we just accept that this is just the way that it's going to be. But she says we need to abandon our complacency. We cannot be comfortable in our suffering. We have to strive for something better. Now, she doesn't say that once you make this decision, that all will be well, there will be no more struggles. No, it's a beginning. But make that decision. Yes, I firmly want to be happy. Again, and this is an internal movement that I need to have for myself, with myself, and no one else can give that to me. Nothing is keeping you from trying. All you have to do is establish inwardly the strong desire for release. This phrase here, nothing is keeping you from trying. All you have to do is establish inwardly the strong desire for release. This is also the antidote from a spiritist perspective for obsession. When we read the different books of Andrea Louise, we learn that one of the ways that Andrea Louise and the noble good spirit team tries to assist in a challenging situation where there is an obsession involved, whether it's incarnate to incarnate or discarnate to incarnate, is to get the person who's either doing the wrong or who is suffering to want to change, to have that strong desire to let go of that suffering, to abandon that acceptance of suffering, and that we could never get better, that this is always going to be the way that it is. It's hard to experience happiness on a much more profound level when we cannot or do not even believe that we have the ability or the potential to even achieve it. So if we can't conceptualize it on our emotional landscape or even in our mind, who's going to be able to convince us that it's true until we reach the point where we're ready? And speaking of, when we mentioned the book Liberation earlier, the spirit Gregorio, we won't tell you the whole story. He was a spirit that lived in the lower zones. He was the boss, sort of. You could say he was maybe the Al Capone or someone of that caliber. He led a not so great city and people in the lower zones. And his loved ones had been trying for centuries to help him. And it wasn't until he was ready and he had that strong desire that he wanted to change. And sometimes therein lies the hardships of parents and of loved ones when we have people near us who are stuck in their own loop of anguish or suffering and bad habits that lead to bad consequences. But there's always hope, because we know, like the book Liberation, nothing is forever. Nothing that is unbalanced or evil is forever. Evil, suffering, pain, all that has an expiration date. The expiration date could come a lot sooner if we put more of an effort, but we could also wait it out. But there is an expiration date. It shall come to pass. She goes on to say, and let me bring up my PowerPoint. She goes on to say, if you are hounded by doubt, rebuff it. Reject it, in other terms. Don't accept those thoughts of doubt. I'm not sure if I can do it. It's really hard. This has become such a habit. I've lived this way for so long. Old dogs can't learn new tricks, which is false. You learned decades ago that the brain has this ability to be pliable and can always learn things. In fact, it's highly recommended that we're always learning new things. So we do have that ability to change. We can't allow that shadow part of ourselves or those naysayers in our lives or those negative thoughts in our mind that are telling us, you can't do it. You won't make it. You're not strong enough. We have to completely reject them. In order for us to firmly make the decision to be happy, to want it, and to believe it. She goes on to say, if you are perturbed by pessimism, remember those who have triumphed before you. It's very easy to get discouraged. We're human. We might be living in the same cycles for many lifetimes, for many generations, and perhaps your parents' have lived in this cycle, and it just seems like there's no end in sight. But there are so many people who have triumphed in history. They gave great examples of overcoming their hardships. And we could cite 101. So we know that it is possible. We know that people have done it. People have accomplished things that they were told they weren't going to be able to accomplish. Recently we were having a discussion and we were reminded of the creator of the Charlie Brown series, The Peanuts, Charles Schulz. And actually, we never knew this, but it has been reminded me, or told me, that Charles Schulz actually was, for the most part of his life, he was told that he was a loser, he didn't have talent, he wouldn't amount to anything, and people were rejecting him left and right. Until Disney came around, and I'm simplifying the story here, but Disney took him on, and he became this household name. And to this day, the Peanuts cartoon, Charlie Brown, all the characters are so well known that it's amazing. And here he was, most of his life being told he'd never amount to anything. He was nothing. Wasn't talented. He was devoid of talent. But he believed in himself. So we have a lot of examples in life of people who triumphed. Even Michael Jordan, who I also was told about the story and I didn't know. I'm a bad American, I guess. And Michael Jordan, the famed basketball player, the MVP, the Michael Jordan, the greatest of the great, wasn't so great once upon a time. He had to work really hard. But because he wanted it and he believed it, he achieved it. He was rejected by so many agents or basketball teams, but he was determined to get what he wanted. And he was determined through his hard work that he would achieve his goals. And indeed, he did. And he retired sort of a golden man in basketball's history. So there's so many other examples of people who have triumphed when everything was against them. Joanna goes on to say, their efforts for victory were no different. It was just that they began their endeavors without your being aware of it. And now all you see is the result. So for many of us, we look at the greats in society. We look at Nikola Tesla. We look at many different successful people in the world. Oprah Winfrey, or even from a spiritist perspective, Divaldo Franco, Chico Xavier, Ivani Pereira, these greats. And we look at the result of their life. We think, wow, they have so much of this prestige. Look at these books that they publish. It's amazing. Their mediumship is amazing. But if you ever had a chance to sit down and either speak with them or read their biographies, their life was full of struggles. It was never an easy moment for them. It always was them. They were working hard on themselves to be better and better and better and to help those around them. And eventually, people began to see the results of that. But oftentimes when we are looking at someone, for instance, to give you an example, who's lost a tremendous amount of weight, and they're really in shape and they're eating healthy, and you might just have met them for the first time and you think, oh, well, that comes so easy to you. You look so great. But what we didn't see are those months and months and years of struggle, of getting up early, of disciplining themselves to eat a certain amount and to eat the right foods. We don't often reflect on that and how much it took to reach the point that they're at. She goes on to say, lastly, firmly appear to Jesus, certain that your prayer will be answered. Lastly, and I'm going to maximize this part of the screen here real quick. Lastly, firmly appeal to Jesus, certain that your prayer will be answered. This is where this belief, this faith comes in. That with all of your heart and soul, with all of your being, you make this appeal. You cry out in prayer, in whatever fashion, but you make this request, this appeal to Jesus. Whatever it is that you're desiring or wanting, and believe that your prayer will be answered. Don't think of it in terms of time frames, because time is an illusion and it's relative. Just know that it will come to pass once we are firmly believing and wanting it. She goes on to say, open yourself to the influx of His restorative energy without erecting barriers. Sometimes we have to empty our cup to allow it to be filled by something else more beautiful. We have to not make any excuses or any reasons, no barriers, nothing. Just allow yourself to be enveloped in that moment when you're making your appeal to Jesus. Allow yourself to be enveloped, as Joanna refers to as His restorative energy. Allow yourself to be elevated in that moment, to feel those energies, to come in contact with it. It's a very personal experience. We can't say that it's not going to look the same for everyone, again, because we are all unique and we experience things differently, and our needs are different. But it's entirely up to you how this experience happens for you, as long as it feels authentic and real to you. She finalizes this chapter with the following statement. If you want peace and health, if you want peace and health, and if you believe they can be realized right away, do not put off your moment to acquire them, for it is now. The time is now. And I think there's that saying, there's no time like the present. It's quite true. Why put it off? Why leave it for tomorrow? If we have the tools, if Joanna is clearly telling us, wanting and believing, those are the keys to our healing. As she, go back here real quick. She says so in the beginning, very beginning. Wanting and believing, those are the requisites. They complement each other, and they are essential for the physical and mental reestablishment of the person desiring to be healed. So, ladies and gentlemen, the ball is in your court. It's up to us to make the decision, what we want, what we desire, and when is the right time for us. So, this is our thoughts that we're sharing for today. And I guess we'll turn it back over to you, Leo.
Thank you, Kirsten. And this is an amazing topic for all of us when we are truly differing with the difficulties of everyday life and the things that we have to endure. And these are great reminders as well, and great connections that you made with the Spiritist thought, right? Teachings, especially when we talk about this logical, that belief is the result of logical development, because we tend to think that it's something in the air, something that is it's so profound that there is no connection with reasoning, right? So that is something that when you were speaking about, I was like, wow, really, we have to change the way we understand and see and understand belief in general. So thank you for that. We do have, as usual, our friends saying hello. to this
No.
moment. Yes, and we will generalize it. And I'm glad you did that gesture, so we spend much time on it. And please accept our heartfelt hello to everyone, and the welcoming to this moment. But we would like to go into the comments and the questions that we have. Um, I believe the first question that we can pose is the one from Yasko. We'll go ahead and put it over here. Should we decide what area of beliefs we may better to put our effort to change, while other areas we may allow to go with the flow? Based on what? Maturity to change this given area, or what is the source of crucial pain?
So if I understand her question, I think she's asking to where do we put our energy, or to what aspect of ourselves? Because inevitably we all have multiple things we need to change about ourselves, right? So it's like, where do I put my energy first? Well, I read something from Joanna a long time ago that she basically says, start from the beginning. So whatever comes first to your mind, whatever's most pressing, whatever's most challenging, whatever's really weighing mostly on your heart, that's what you should put your energy towards in terms of making a decision. What should we decide to work on first? And then she says, maturity to change this given area. What is the source of crucial pain? Well, that definitely is a powerful question, Yasko. And you do ask the best questions, I have to say. So I'm not even sure if I could answer that question. What is the source of crucial pain? Well, we know that suffering is a symptom, Joanna tells us, and the rest lies within, the origins are within our spirit, us, the immortal spirit that we are. So, there are innumerable complexities, from one lifetime to the next. So without wanting to overwhelm ourselves, sometimes the best thing is just to work on the first thing that comes to mind. Like I said, that's the most pressing to you, that's the most difficult or most challenging, and kind of allow it to unravel from there. It's always good to, work systematically. However, when you're dealing with your emotions and challenges of that sort, there's a lot of maybe not systematic stuff involved there. Sometimes it's good to use a workbook. There are a lot of books on Amazon. Sometimes just actually utilizing a spiritist book. And let me throw this shameless plug in for one of Joanna's great books called Existential Conflicts. And this is a great place. I'm sorry it's all marked up because we love this book so much. To deal with a lot of different emotions. I don't know if that's coming off clear there. And my screen went black. But it's a great book if you wanted to start working on yourself. She has a wealth of information in this book as well. Existential Conflicts. It is in English. It's a great place to start. I also wanted to, Leo, I know you were reading the comments, but I'm going to jump on the comment reading bandwagon with you and read some other comments. Looks like from Justin Gray. Off topic, and don't even know if you'll see this. I delete FB. I know we haven't been FB connected a number of years, but anyway, I'm excited to hear your talk. Wow, I really haven't. Hello, Justin. Wow. Thanks for watching. It's good to reconnect. I think you might be asking a question here right after Yasko's comment. I wonder what kind of parallels could be drawn between belief, faith, and what the Bible said that the definition of love is. I bet one could draw some parallels. And thank you for the congratulations on our third baby. Thank you. Definitely, there could be so many parallels. And we kind of mentioned this during our talk as well. We could have a whole other discussion on belief and faith and the philosophy behind it all. And, and what the definition of love is. And I think Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, is probably one of the most quoted, at least from the Bible, that love is kind, love is patient. But there's so much material out there that we could read that's so enriching to our minds. So anything that we're doing that's working towards that inevitably is going to help us to work towards to diminish our suffering. But why? Because there's an actual mechanism. We're connecting to these higher vibrations, and we're connecting with our higher self, our mentors, our guides, and it's enabling us to sort of get out of our funk, to get out of our shadows. So thank you guys for sharing your comments. Aloysio, go ahead. Oh, sorry, Leo, go ahead. You do your thing.
No, I believe Justin also made a comment on the Memoirs of a Suicide. Is one of the best, and then to read the intro to know that she had done the same in former life. Wow, I think how many people she had helped with that book. Yeah. In terms of suffering,
and just as a little background, when she mediumistically received that book, she went through a great deal of her own personal suffering, re-encountering her own stories, and then having to sort of experience through this spirit who was psychographed through her, their experience, and to just learn of so much, because that book is so rich. For those of you who don't know what he's talking about, the book's The Memoirs of a Suicide. It is in English. It's quite a thick book. And I always say it's not for the faint of heart, because it is kind of graphic in a way, but it is so instrumental and for us to understand the minds of those who choose to end their life. And it's not something so simple as, well, they just gave up. It's much more complex. So we highly recommend that book. Yvonne Piedada was an amazing medium, and she psychographed many books that were truly, truly, truly amazing and are recently being translated. I think there's one called On the Canvas of the Infinite, also beautiful as well. But going on, it's like Louisa made a comment as well. The problem can be when sometimes we think that the acquisition of new material stuff will solve our inner sufferings. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a fallacy. It's a false belief. If we think that consumerism and consuming more things and obtaining a bigger house, more nicer clothes, a newer car, that any of those things can bring us lasting happiness. If that were the case, everyone in Hollywood who's famous and all the famous people of the world should be really happy, should be attaining a level of euphoria. But we know that this is the farthest thing from the truth. We know that mental illness and depression runs rampant in that community. Some might think, oh, well, just the people who are poor in the slums, those are, no. So it is a fallacy to believe that working towards obtaining physical things. And when Joanna says wanting and believing, to obtain something, it's not to obtain things on the exterior, but it's that conquering of ourself, inevitably.
Very well. It's amazing comments, and it's also important for us to remember on how to apply this in our lives, right? And bring it to our day-to-day lives. One of the questions that I would like to ask Kirsten is we talked about how we need to change, right? This idea of wanting and believing, right? It's very interesting that we also have. I was adding other elements, and you mentioned that comes along with it. We don't live by ourselves. When we make decisions, it obviously it affects us and affects others too. In this regard, when we choose to seize suffering, which requires a change, and we have others who not necessarily don't believe on us, but they can see our potential, but they still do things that kind of stops us from reaching the level or the goal that we want to reach. In our daily lives, in a practical way, what would you say would be a good way to deal with? Because obviously, people may not understand what we would like to accomplish and how we would like to accomplish at times. So, how to deal with this? And I'm talking about sometimes family members, friends, and people who we come in contact that when they see changes on us, they tend to again, not only help, but sometimes really make it worse.
Yeah, that's a great question, Leo. And I don't want to take anything out of context, because the relationships we have with one another and our families are often so complex, and don't just stem from one lifetime. We know they often stem from many, 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 many lifetimes, are very intertwined. However, for the sake of the conversation and the sake wanting to answer your question, we have to learn how to disassociate, or differentiate rather, and separate what is someone else's issues and what are ours. Now, if we are making a decision, a clear decision to be better, a clear decision to work on ourselves, and there are others around us who are trying to build barriers or creating problems for us, we have to know how to emotionally detach from that and say, you know what? That's your issue. If you don't like seeing me get better, that has nothing to do with me. I want to get better. I'm going to stay on this road. And those are the people who are successful. Because if Michael Jordan, if Charles Schultz, if all the great minds out there who became great listened to their naysayers, they would not have achieved what they would have achieved. They would not have overcome. And yeah, okay, so Charles Schultz, he amassed a great fortune, of course. But that's not what life was about. Life was about, he believed in himself, he believed in his artistic talent, and he wanted to continue to overcome his own emotional challenges. So it wasn't just removing any physical barriers. It was about believing in himself and to keep moving, because it's so easy to believe the naysayers. It's so easy to say, you know what? I give up. This is too hard. Everyone's against me, or certain people that are close to me are against me, and it's hard. But that's why it is so important when Joanna says wanting and believing, you have to want it so bad that you can taste it. You know, and forgive me for bringing a personal anecdote, but I remember over 10 plus years ago, 18 years ago, almost 19 years ago, when I became a mother for the first time. My situation was not ideal, and I was very young, and I had big ideas for myself. And there were people who were very close to me that clearly stated to me, you're not going to be able to do it. You're a single mom, you're young, you don't have money, you have no resources, you're not going to be able to do it. And in fact, I didn't have a car, didn't have a job. All I had was a deep desire to be a nurse, to go to college, to get an education, and to want to be a better person, because I wanted to be able to be someone great in the eyes of my daughter. I didn't care what the world thought. I just wanted to be something good to her and to be a good example. So throughout the years, it wasn't just once or twice or 3 times. It was again and again and again. I was bombarded by people close to me, friends telling me that you need to make time, you can't miss out these first few years. You need to dedicate them. I was a dedicated mother, but I also knew and had in my mind that I wanted a better life. And I don't just mean in a material sense. I meant in an overall sense. Because bettering ourselves, educating ourselves, it brings us out of a negative situation. So we're sharing all that to say that, again, I hope I'm answering your question, Leo, that we have to know when to tune those voices out and to really just say, you know what? Those are that person's issues. They're not mine. What I'm working on is something good, is something wholesome, it's something nourishing to my soul, and inevitably will be good for me and good for my family. And that's my answer to you.
Thank you, and that's a great answer, Kirsten. Bringing this aspect of multiple lives together, right? Who knows what we have done in the past, and it's not to blame or to criticize ourselves and live um, uh, a life that we keep digging the past in a negative way. But what have we done, perhaps in the past, that it put us in this situation that now we have to fight with our fibers, right, to get out of that situation, and also to allow other people or to habilitate other people to see the value of the change and how good that will be for ourselves in terms of living a better environment at home with our family members and our friends. So thank you for the answer. Thank you for this amazing reminder. Talking about suffering is never easy, but things makes it easier. Things becomes easier when we bring Jesus to the equation, right? And these teachings that Joanna de Angelis brings to us and exemplifying him as the source of happiness is just an amazing topic for all of us. I don't think we have any other comment or question that we need to go over it. I don't know if you would like to say your final comments and just kind of bring to us the closing prayer so we can finalize this evening.
My final thoughts will be from Joanna. If we can go back to my second to last slide, if we can pull that back up real quick, my assistant. Oh, my apologies. Hold on one second. It's my fault. There we go. It's her last words in this book. She says, if you want peace and health, and if you believe they can be realized right away, do not put off your moment to acquire them, for it is now. So those are the final words. Time is now. If you want to be happy, if you want to change your circumstances mentally, emotionally, physically, want and believe it, and begin to set things in motion to make that happen. So thank you, everyone, for watching this evening, or if you're watching the recorded version of this. We certainly do hope that Joanna's words have allowed you to believe a little bit more in the impossible. And I mean that in all the most positive way it could possibly mean, without being redundant. I hope that her words have instilled this opportunity that you will now grant yourself to get out of this state of complacency, to get out of the loop, to get out of this cycle of suffering. Because we don't have to stay in it. We don't need to suffer. You do not need to suffer. We were not created to live a life purely of suffering. We were created to reach happiness, to experience love, and all the great emotions in the world. So with that, dear friends, let us say our final prayer. And if you join me by closing your eyes, lifting up your minds, your hearts, your souls, to our divine Creator, to our Master and Model Jesus. Let us open up our heart and our deepest desires, the ones in which we truly want to be happy, to be whole, to be connected to our source. Let us ask for all those things now, in these quiet moments with our Master Jesus. if we want and believe to get over that illness, that challenge, that difficulty, that pain, that suffering, let us affirm that now to Jesus, that from the depths of your soul, you want that. Let us be like all of those who came to Jesus before, wanting to be healed, wanting and believing that it was possible. And we ask our mighty brother, master and guide, may we feel his loving vibrations, his embrace all around us, enveloping every fiber of our being, reminding us of our own strength and power that we have to heal ourselves. With immense gratitude in our hearts, we thank our mentors, our guides, our dear Joanna de Angelis, Divaldo Franco, for bringing forth this beautiful works, this collection of books from Joanna de Angelis. We thank all those noble spirits and guides who went into this hard work, bringing forth Spiritism. And we pray in this moment for all those that are suffering, those that are in our book of prayers, those names that are in our hearts, who we wish well, who we hope get healed, overcome their challenges. May our loving vibrations reach them and heal them. We thank you for this opportunity, and so be it.
Thank you.